not lazy, it's just half-ass reviews.
What's today? October?
It's Nudie Magazine Day!
Well, I suppose I should talk about a horror game since it's October, right? Other than the entire month being Nudie Magazine Day, it's also the month where Halloween takes place, and that usually means that everything's horror-themed, which I have no quarrels with, by the way. So why not review Resident Evil Gaiden for the Game Boy Color? Well, there's no reason, I suppose. I mean, I can review whatever game I want. But this is an oftentimes overlooked game in the Resident Evil series because it's non-canon to the main story and plays rather oddly. Just looking at videos of it made me weary to try it out, but I'm glad I gave this game a chance because it's actually pretty fun if you're a little open-minded. Despite the limitations of being on the Game Boy Color, the atmosphere is somehow pretty creepy with its music and sound effects. If I knew nothing about this game or the series it was spun off of, then I'd be intrigued and excited at the main menu with its graphic imagery and eerie music. It says Resident Evil in the title, but this really is a standalone game that doesn't feel like anything I've ever played before in any franchise. If you aren't a baby about the fact that it's an 8-bit game with 2 buttons, you'll be impressed by what they were actually able to accomplish here. The combat, which is the main reason I was hesitant to give this game a try, is actually pretty fun. You encounter enemies walking around that'll initiate battle sequences, much like in Earthbound, but some enemies carry items that are essential to beating the game, plus it can be pretty annoying to walk into a room and see zombies you let go standing there right in front of you. So it really is best to just kill whatever you happen to cross paths with. In this game, you're encouraged to initiate combat, whereas every other Resident Evil game at the time teaches you to avoid it whenever possible, which is yet another reason why you should just forget that this is a Resident Evil game. Just make sure you get good at shooting quick, because ammo is scarce, and the knife is just about as useless as my meat scepter on the night of my honeymoon. And, oh yeah, sometimes you have a partner with their own health bar that you can equip different items with, as well as switching back and forth between characters in the middle of battle. It makes things slightly interesting, but it's not that big of a deal. As for the story, you play as Barry Burton from Resident Evil 1, and your goal is to save Leon on a cruise ship, which is a cool setting that they reuse later in Resident Evil Revelations. It'd have been cooler to have a survival horror zombie apocalypse type of game on a cruise ship as opposed to what Revelations ended up becoming, but hey, that game was still pretty good. It doesn't make sense that they would send Barry on this cruise ship with nothing but a handgun and knife when they knew beforehand that some spooky shit was going on. It makes sense gameplay-wise to not start you off with too much, but logically it leaves you scratching your head. Why not have him lose his weapons somehow? And no, I'm not thinking too far into a non-canon spin-off on the Game Boy Color not making as much sense as it could. It is a nitpick, but it still comes off as a tad lazy to me, so frig off. Also, since we're nitpicking, using keys sucks. You have to select them from your items list as opposed to just trying to open the doors in question. I wouldn't hold it against them, but this isn't the first game in the series. Even though I did savor the whole review to forget it's a Resident Evil game. But fuck you, being a Game Boy Color game isn't a good reason to have to unlock doors by going to your items. Thankfully though, you never get confused as to what you're supposed to be doing with the PDA, similar to what's used in Resident Evil 6. This game was ahead of its time, I guess. The creepy music I mentioned earlier changes for no reason at all completely at random, but it's eerie and nice, so no complaints there. Overall, this is a fun game, and if you come across it at a yard sale, flea market, or use trade-in credit, you should definitely give this game a whirl if you're looking for something a little different. Thank heavens I picked this up when it was relatively unknown because again, like my genitalia, it's hard to find. But unlike my genitalia, it can be a little pricey these days. Resident Evil Gaiden for the Game Boy Color gets a 9 out of 12.1 because I'm a dick. Do the math.